Hi folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead. This is Travis, doing a little brush burning today, trying to keep the snake population to a minimum and also some fire management. Did a video over on Patreon about that this morning. Also, what I'm going to be talking about today, I did a video on Patreon a week or so ago. Was going to just post it on here also, but I thought I'd make a separate video just for YouTube. And it's about water. You know, the stuff you put that out with. You know, I did the video a few days ago about an EMP. And, you know, we've talked about the grid going down or various other scenarios that could happen. But I'm telling you, water is something that while we all talk about, all plan for, we need to always reevaluate of whether we're planning well enough, that if our plans are good enough for the water that we need. It is, you know, the thing that keeps us alive. We can go without food much longer than water. It's one of the primary things from a survival you know, teaching that you need to make sure you have water. You know, under certain circumstances, about 3 days is all you have before you need water. Then there's also cooking needs, sanitary needs. Water is a vitally important thing. But is your water supply or your water plans, are they good enough? Have you really thought through them? Because you might say, well, I, you know, store up a lot of water. Well, you can't store up usually enough water forever, at least. You know, if it's a short-term kind of SHTF, I guess you could probably store up enough water. But you know, if it's long-term, if it's end of the world kind of changing, you're not going to be able to store up enough water. And then what do you do when your water supply becomes contaminated? Those of you that have wells and springs and ponds and creeks and stuff on your property, like, you know, we do here, you may say, well, you know, I've got a generator or solar or something to pump it, or a manual pump or whatever. That's a good thing. You need to have backups to be able to get that water. But do you have backups to purify that water? Do you have a way to actually purify that water? And the reason being is if something major, catastrophic, epically apocalyptic that happened, for instance, an EMP or just a general grid failure, the water supply over large amounts of our country could become too contaminated to use. And it's kind of iffy on whether you could even purify it. You know, some of these very good purifiers or filters like Berkey's, they might be able to handle it, but it's going to be even tough then. I would probably still boil it and do something else to it. And the reason is a lot of people don't quite get how America's water system works, how our water system and our sewage system are so interconnected and so dependent upon the grid. If your water supply, whether it's from a well, or it's city water or a spring or whatever, could become very easily contaminated. If the whole world ends, the balloon goes up, the grid goes down, and what happens is our sewage systems and systems that, you know, can contain industrial waste and things like that, farm agricultural waste, can very easily start backing up and overflowing into water systems. And after a period of time, groundwater, lots of water sources can become seriously contaminated. If it was some type of major event, let's go to the EMP that I talked about. And there's talks of, you know, 80 to 90% casualty rates within a year. Even if it's not that high, let's just say 40 or 50% casualty rates. Do you realize how many people that would be? We're talking 150 to 200 million people in the United States if it's at 40 to 50% within 1 year. There's no way you can bury all those people. you know, the rest of the people that survive are probably going to be ill, or they're going to be hid out away from society. There's no way you could, you know, I would think that the magnitude of something like that would be so large that there's going to be, you know, mass graves, or possibly even just bodies out in the open. And then you take that, contamination because of that, you take rotting food, animals dying, you know, cattle and stuff, because they're not getting taken care of, and a lot of cattle can't survive without humans. Then you have sewer systems. Most sewer systems, treatment plants they purify the water, they clean the water out, and eventually, at some point, that water trickles down into downstream into water systems after it's been cleaned. And depending on, some of them are different, each one's kind of different, but many of them, you know, they're separated because by these dams, these gates and different things that would keep that sewage from, you know, dumping into water systems. Grid goes down, people stop coming to work because, you know, hey, I'm not going to come to work not getting paid while I'm starving to death and my family's dying and stuff. So man walks away from his job. Human, sorry, women could be working there too. I don't want to sound sexist. And there's no power anyways, so there's nothing to contain that sewage, and that's just human sewage. We're not even talking about agricultural waste, industrial waste, all these types of things that are being contained and kept from the environment, from water systems, because of power from the grid. And if it goes down, eventually that stuff is all going to break down, and it's going to start seeping, pouring, flooding, dumping, whatever it is, into the water that you could be dependent upon to keep you alive. So that's another level of preparedness you need to start thinking about. Maybe you have a good well, maybe you have a good spring, and you have a way to pump that out, and you're like, you know, I don't really need to worry about, you know, purifying, cleaning it, because I got a good, clean water system. Eventually, it is possible that water system could become contaminated, because the vast amounts, there's different reading I've done and different opinions, but a lot of the opinion is that if it all comes crashing down, so much of that's going to be dumping into the water system, it's going to be polluting ground, you know, table waters and stuff like that, you know, unless you live a long way off from one of these places, eventually, you know what runs downhill, yeah, it's eventually going to work its way into your water system. And, you know, we go back in history and we look at plagues and stuff that happened. Most of them was because of contaminated water systems. And I believe that the potential of mass contamination that we're looking at would be far greater than anything that's seen in the history. You know, the water systems, and that would include also for animals. Animals could be getting sick and dying, humans dying. It's a cascading effect that would happen. Even if a more regional you know, power outage happened, that could happen. Look at when hurricanes hit, earthquakes, tsunamis. One of the main things, other than there's the initial damage that's done. The initial damage, flooding, wind, whatever it is, ground shaking, whatever. After that, one of the first things that becomes an issue that people begin to become worried about is how it's contaminating the water system. Flood waters contaminating the water systems. Nuclear reactors, you know, failing and contaminating water systems. Look at Fukushima. The damage is still not completely known. I mean, they're finding, you know, pollutants all the way up in Alaska from that. And that's been a few years ago. So the potential for a catastrophic nightmare, really, it would be a nightmare, is really high. And I don't even think it has to be something like a big EMP that would cause it. Our infrastructure, our electrical grid is so fragile. It really is. It's not quite as hardened as you think it is. It is so delicate that it wouldn't take much to cause a failure that would cause a cascading domino effect down the line. And when that happens, these sewage treatment plants, whether it's people sewage, animal sewage, industrial, waste, those types of things are going to start backing up. And the potential for those to end up in your drinking water are really high. So what have you done to prepare for that? Do you have, there's distillation. It's not that difficult. I live in the Ozarks. For some reason, and I was born in the Smoky Mountains, and I live in the Ozark Mountains, so I know a few things about stills. So, but I don't have one, and that's the honest truth. ATF, I don't have one, but I do know a little bit about them. But they can be used to help, make drinking water. There are other more modern systems that you can use, that you can purchase, but it's something that you need to start making plans. Sure, those little filters, the Life Straws and the Sawyer Minis and stuff like that, they're great. They're great for your bug out bags and stuff like that. But especially for you families out there, you need to start coming up with, reevaluate your water plan, because it is so important. Most people use way more water than I think you have an idea. Now, those off-gridders and stuff that, it's harder to get your water. At least you have to put more effort into getting your water. You get it. We have a well here, and we're thankful for that. But where we came from, it was a spring. It was an old spring box, and had a solar powered pump on it that could pump it into a cistern, and we would do that every once in a while. But really, it just, for the most part, we would walk down and get it in containers and buckets and come back, and that's where our water came from. And you really appreciate it, and you start to realize just how much water you use. And for the average person, it's a lot. It's several gallons a day. And are you able to purify that much water to drink? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know, if what I'm talking about, where sewage, systems start dumping into water systems and rotting. I know it's not something pleasant that anyone wants to talk about, but decaying human and animal bodies everywhere, how much contamination we're talking about. I don't know how well these, water filters will handle that. Because of the amount of contamination. And then you throw in industrial waste and then possibly nuclear waste leaching into water systems. I really don't. I mean, part of me wants to think that, a Berkey may not be able to handle something like that. Is there something better? It's hard to find it. I don't know. But what I do know is that it could be catastrophic. Just having a well or just having some containers full of water, because you can't, store up that amount of water unless, well, I guess you could, but the average person, average family can't store up enough water more than, maybe a month or two at the most, and that's, probably pushing it. So you need to start really thinking about this on a grand scale. We're not talking about going down to, a creek like the springs around here. I can take you guys to a creek or spring around here that I have no problem drinking out of. I know it's a risk. I get it. I know it's a risk. But I'll drink out of it because I've done it so many times, and I know people that do it, and it might have, small amounts of something in it, but your body can kind of handle that. And I'm not saying advising that you do that, but I know of places around here that it's, clean enough to drink out of. Not downstream, certainly, but like at the mouth of springs and stuff. But after something like this happens, even that water could be very contaminated. And it may take a while. I'm south of, St. Louis, Chicago, Kansas City's kind of more west, but still that could trickle downhill. There's enough stuff in those big cities that it could all start coming my way. And unless you live way up north, and I mean way up north, most of us are downstream, eventually downstream, of something that could potentially contaminate our water system. When you factor in all these different things. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your water plan may not be good enough. And I'm not putting anyone down. That's not what I mean by that. What I mean is that you need to start really looking at it, and start thinking about, you're not talking about cleaning water from the creek down the road. At least at first you will be. But later on, if this cascading damage starts happening, that water down the creek from your house that you're planning on using could be much, much, much more contaminated than it is now. And so you have to start thinking about that. As much as we don't like government, or at least I don't, they do, they are there to try to, establish guidelines and rules for people and businesses and everything else of dumping into our water system, even though it does happen. Well, without government, without the grid, and without a lot of people, a lot of those things, various different types of waste, will eventually, it's going to end up in your water. So start thinking about that. Start doing some more research into it. This video isn't about giving you all the information. It's about giving you some ideas to start running with and evaluating your water plan, because it is important. I mean, when NASA goes up into space and they go to Mars and stuff, one of the main things they're looking for is water, because it's so important. And if you don't have it and you don't have clean water, well, you're going to be SOL, and it's going to be fast. And that's not something that modern people have ever really had to deal with. You and I, for the most part, I know I'm making general, accusations here, but in general, you and I have never had to deal with not having drinkable water around. Some countries do, but you and I have not. And that's something that we need to start thinking about, because it could get really bad really fast if something big happens. All right, if you want to know about my snake management project, it's not really a project, it's just burning limbs on the homestead that fall down all winter. You can go over to my Patreon page and check that out. $1 a month gets you in the door. Don't have to. I still love you all just the same if you don't. It's just if you want to kind of, throw $1 my family's way to kind of help us out, I try to put extra content over there. All right. Thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.